Good evening. I'm Beth Keller from the Highland Park Public Library. We'd like to welcome you to our annual Fall Book Buzz. We're so excited to bring you a sneak preview of books that are publishing this fall, along with some recent favorites, and we hope that you'll find plenty to add to your list for what to read next. Tonight, we'll hear from publishers Penguin Random House, Workman, and HarperCollins, along with several of our librarians. Following tonight's discussion, there'll be a question and answer session. You can submit your questions using the chat icon on the bottom of your screen. Please note that tonight's event is being recorded. As an attendee tonight, your microphone and camera are turned off. Closed captioning has been enabled. You can turn off the closed captioning by clicking on the More or the Live Transcription icon at the bottom of your screen. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Brian Wilson is the Sales and Marketing Manager for Penguin Random House for Chicago. Annie Mazes is Head of Adult Library Marketing at Workman Publishing. And Lainey Mays is the Library Marketing Associate for the Library Marketing Team at HarperCollins. Our librarians joining us tonight are Lori Skinner, the Manager of Information and Reader Services, Michelle Bulick, Katie Slatko, and Julia Bay. To start the evening, we'll begin with Brian Wilson from Penguin Random House. Brian's joining us tonight from the Chicago area. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Beth. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for logging on this evening. I also want to thank the Highland Park Library for inviting me. I'm Brian Wilson from Penguin Random House, and I'm happy to present these 4 titles to you. So the first book is The Matrix by Laura Groff. This is her latest book. Her previous book came out in 2015 called Fates and Furies. Since then, she's released a short story collection called Florida. She's an amazing author that did a ton of research for this historical novel that is both ambitious and atmospheric. The story takes place in the year 1138 in the English countryside. It's about a minor royal. Her name is Eleanor of Aquitaine, who is banished from the French royal court to a sleepy abbey in England on the verge of falling apart, and the nuns are nearly starving. She tries to steer things in a new direction and course. She tries to make the abbey a more habitable place for the nuns. This story is intriguing, it's creative, there is some risk involved, there's passion, obsession, and even a little lust. And the reviews have all been overwhelmingly positive. Okay, the next book, The Last Chance Library. This is a novel by Freya Simpson. This is the author's first novel, and from all indications, it's going to be a home run. The author is from London, and this book has a quintessentially British feel to it. The story is set in a sleepy English village about a longtime librarian, and her name is June Jones. She prefers to keep to herself and is very awkward and shy in public and lives a solitary existence. She loves her library, and her favorite pastime, in case you can't guess, is reading. One day, she gets word that the library is slated to close and decides to do something about it. A campaign begins to save the library, and she ends up coming out of her shell, sort of. Along the way, she runs into an old friend, now a lawyer, that helps her out, along with some dedicated patrons. This story is heartwarming, it's humorous, has a bit of grief, and romance in it. The next book, A Slow Fire Burning. This is by Paula Hawkins. This is her third novel, and she's most well known for the book and movie Girl on the Train. Maybe you remember it. This is a mystery that opens with a grisly murder on a houseboat parked in a waterway in London. It's a layered whodunit that even when you peel the layers and twists away, it's hard to discern who actually did it. It involves 3 women that have no connection to each other, but each have connections to the victim. Each has an axe to grind as well. It's written in the third person. It's a dark psychological thriller that's gripping, full of deceit, murder, and revenge, and it's very satisfying. Now, the last book I'm going to present is The Lincoln Highway. This is by Amor Tolls, sorry. And by the way, this book isn't out until October 5th, so talk to the Highland Park Library to get it on reserve for you. The author is most well known for the incredibly successful novel, A Gentleman in Moscow. As that book was, this one is a historical novel that takes place in the early 1950s. And a great part of the backbone surrounding this book takes place along the Lincoln Highway, which was one of America's earliest coastal highway routes that stretched from New York City to San Francisco, and it even went through a little bit of southern Chicago, like Chicago Heights and Aurora. But this isn't just a story about the highway. It's a story about a young man freshly released from prison or prison farm doing a stint there. And he's driven home after his sentence is completed by the prison warden. The young man wants to collect his younger brother and take him to California to start a new life. Their mother is missing, but they suspect she could be in California, and the father is dead. Well, his plans get hijacked when two of his prison mates hid themselves in the trunk of the warden's car. Those two have different plans that take the four of them on a harebrained scheme out east, where misguided intentions and unexpected adventures ensue. This is a multi-layered and unexpected results happen. There's full of intrigue, humor, all mixed in to make this a gratifying, delightful read. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great selection of titles. I'm super excited to dive into some of them. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Annie Mazes, again, the head of adult library marketing at Workman Publishing. Okay, Annie, take it away.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much for being here and having me tonight. I am going to start off talking about this debut novel, which just came out 2 weeks ago. It is one of those books where you are just blown away that this is the first book. I mean, this woman has written an incredible short story collection, but I can't write at all. And I am blown away when people just come right out of the gate with this amazing novel. Kirkus, one of the trade reviews, said that her prose is incantatory and often lovely, swirling and dance-like rhythms that sweep the story along. So the story focuses around a young woman named Vidya. It takes place in Bombay in the 1960s and 70s. It provides a really immersive cultural experience and an incredibly vivid exploration of relatable themes like gender and art and motherhood. It follows the life of Vidya it's in 5 parts. It follows her life from when she's a child, taking care of her family because her mother's not really in the picture, growing up to adulthood and what she experiences along the way. But all of it is based around her love affair with this dance called Kathak, which is an incredibly difficult type of dance to learn, and she falls in love with it as a young girl, and it carries her through incredibly challenging times in her life. But it's really a young woman who's really trying to seek freedom for herself in a very real coming of age novel, but just beautiful writing. Next is Pump. So millennia ago, when we were first beginning to puzzle over the mysteries of the human body, one organ stood out as particularly interesting. From the origins of circulation, still evident in some microorganisms today, to the enormous hearts of blue whales, we journey with bills shut to beaches where horseshoe crabs are being harvested for their life-saving blood, and under the sea to learn about the world's most natural antifreeze found in the veins of ice fish. We also follow him through human history as scientists hypothesize wrongly and rightly about the heart, ultimately developing the technologies that are used today to help study it and save it. It's incredibly researched, it's very engaging, completely accessible natural history, and it would be perfect if you are a fan of Mary Roach or Bill Bryson. Next up, we have a book that I think is just a really fun concept. Colleen Kinder put out this call to all these amazing authors. You can see a few of them listed there: Lauren Groff, Elizabeth Colbert, Pam Houston. And she said, write a letter to a stranger who haunts you. And the responses poured in. They were intimate and addictive. You can pop in and out of this book. It's just a delight to read. They're in short, insightful essays around such themes as gratitude and wonder and farewell. They guide us through the mysteries of human connection around the world. They are replete with observations about how we live, what we seek, how a stranger's loaded glance can incredibly affect your life in ways you didn't expect. It's really moving. And, especially in a time where we're not really connecting as much in person, it was just a really lovely insight into how you can connect with people. And my last book is Gastro Obscura, which is just a visual treat. This is 400 pages. It comes out October 12th, so you do have to wait a little bit, but it is 400 pages of just incredibly stunning color photography. It's created by the curious minds behind Atlas Obscura, but this focuses on food and drink. So it goes all around the world and it takes you to so many countries, learning about wonderful, weird, incredible foods. So you can learn about beer that's made from fog in Chile, or Egypt's 2,000-year-old egg ovens. But far more than a menu, it's just really an incredible insight into the place that food has in so many cultures. It's a perfect book if you love armchair travel, real travel, if you're missing travel, if you love food and drink, and the idea of sitting around having a wonderful meal with wonderful people. But it's a really special book, but it is a feast for the eyes. And that is it from me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Annie. Some of our patrons might remember that we hosted one of the authors for Atlas Obscura a couple years ago, so they're likely familiar with that title, and that's the food one, and that sounds great. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lainey Mays from HarperCollins, the Library Marketing Associate for the Library Marketing team at HarperCollins. Thanks, Lainey.
Thanks, Beth. And thanks to everyone, and also my other publishing friends telling all these good books. My TBR list is growing too. So I'm glad you guys could join us. The first book I wanted to talk about is one that is coming in November. So you have a little bit of time. This is one that is really getting a lot of buzz. So I wanted to tell you about it so that you can be kind of the first to know. So it comes in on November 2nd, called All Her Little Secrets by Wanda M. Morris. This is our lead read title for the season. So that's a program where our sales team, sales force gets together and votes on one title a season, and they're going to get behind it and just really show all the love. And this one was our fall 2021 selection. So everyone in-house really loves it. There's so much love coming from the outside world. Wanda was on the cover of Library Journal in August. So you're going to see this book. So I'm excited to tell you about it. So this is a twisty legal thriller that takes place in a legal office, not the courtroom, but she's a lawyer. And Karen Slaughter, author Karen Slaughter, calls it a vibrant and welcome new voice to the thriller space. It follows Elise Littlejohn, who, like I said, is a corporate attorney. She works at an Atlanta company, and she seems to have it all. She kind of had a really tough past, and she put that behind her and went to an Ivy League college and came back and really worked her way up in this company. And she doesn't talk about her past much. She doesn't want anyone to know. And she has a relationship with her married boss. So she really doesn't want anyone to know her current secrets either. But one morning she arrives to see him in the executive suite and he is dead. He's been shot, and she decides to run. She decides not to call the police. And that's because she has some secrets in the past that she thinks they might pin her to doing something else. And she doesn't want anyone digging into her past. And now the cops are looking, it kind of had the opposite effect. They're looking more into her. She kind of looks guilty for running, and they may uncover some other things as well. She's moved up to replace her boss. So she's moved up to these executive meetings where she is the only Black person, but female in the room. So she's got two roles to fill in some way. She's not really taken as seriously. She's told to do things that seem a little sketchy. And it's a story of tokenism and racial issues in a corporate environment. And it's such a page turner, and it goes back and forth between the past and present. So you have these great side characters in her life and a really, really sweet story of love of family. And she just wants to kind of overcome all of these secrets in her past. But there's, like I said, a lot of sexism in the office and racism, and she has to go, and that's looked at with a really nuanced lens. And so that's All Her Little Secrets by Wanda and Morris. Comes out in November, so you have a little bit of time. Next, I want to talk about Bright Burning Things by Lisa Harding. This comes out in December, so you do have a little bit of time for this one too. This author was just on our Facebook Live we do as a team every week, and we absolutely love this author so much. And the book is just such a strong, strong book, and it will pull at your heartstrings. This author is an Irish author. She's an actress and a playwright, and this is her American debut. So she's never been published in America. And this novel is about a woman named Sonia. She's an unsuccessful actress, and she kind of had this fabulous life, but now she's developed a white wine addiction. So she's dealing with that part of her life and a failed career, and it's all mixing with this traumatic childhood she had. And the only key thing keeping her afloat is her son Tommy and her other son, what she calls her dog Herbie. And as she battles this addiction, she's kind of given an ultimatum where she can't take care of Tommy, and so she has to get better in order to keep him. And so we see her go to rehab and come out and try to put this life together. And she's a character you would easily maybe dismiss in other books or movies or TV, but this really shows her struggle, and you really want her to win. And she's just thinking 10 steps ahead, but can't get one step ahead. And it's just, you feel a little breathless with her. You're trying to fight with her. But at the end of the day, it's a story of love. She loves her son so much, and it's kind of in spite of everything. It's not between one or the other. And they're like, you go through revelations with her and setbacks, but also wins. And it's really, really sweet. And it's gotten all these starred reviews from our trade publishers. So really one that's going to be really special. So that's Bright Burning Things by Lisa Harding. And then next, I want to tell you about Home Stretch. This is on sale now, so you can go get it or get it at the library. It's called, it's a Home Stretch by Graham Norton. So you might know Graham Norton, another Irish author, but you might know Graham Norton from his BBC show. I love that show so much. And if I didn't think he was talented enough already, I didn't know he wrote, but he writes all these books, ones that do so. His last one, Holding, won the Irish Independent Popular Fiction Award. He's won like 8 BAFTA awards. I don't know how he has time in the day. But this story is set in the late 80s in a small Irish community, and they're prepping for a wedding when the story begins. And everyone in the wedding, including the bride and groom, are in this car accident, and 3 survive and 3 are killed. And now Connor, who was driving that day, he's a survivor, but now he has to deal with an angry and a mourning town that just brings a lot of shame to him, and he has to finally decide to leave because he can't deal with that. And he eventually finds himself in London, and then he goes to New York, and here he finds his community because he's exploring his own sexuality, and he eventually finds a community that really accepts him. And so now, decades later, he has to face his family and his past and come back and decide if everything that day is what it seemed like to them. And I listened to the audiobook of this. I really encourage you to, because he reads it. So if you're into audiobooks, this is a really great one to get. And there's a lot of fraught tension in Ireland for this past of like not accepting their queer citizens. And so I think Norton really wanted to dive into the people who stayed and really got the brunt of that. And so he wanted to discover that, but also the people coming back and feeling accepted. But it's really funny and full of heart as well. He's a terrific writer. And then just quickly, last, I want to talk about When Ghosts Come Home by Wiley Cash. This was on sale on this past Tuesday, so you can get it too. So Wiley Cash is a New York Times bestselling author of A Land More Kind Than Home and acclaimed author of This Dark Road to Mercy and The Last Ballad. This is set in a North Carolina town. A low-flying plane awakens their sheriff in the middle of the night. He thinks something's got to be wrong, so he goes to the airfield on this small coastal town in North Carolina. he arrives and there's a plane crash and no sign of a pilot, but then they find a local man dead nearby. He's been shot. And so now this investigation opens and everyone's a suspect, including the man that is dead that they find. There's a lot of rumors, and there's also attention of a new sheriff's race, and just a lot of different things coming together. He has a past. He has a daughter that's coming back home who has a loss. He has things in his past that he's trying to get over. It's suspenseful and it's tender, and it's going to be really good for book clubs because there's a lot to discuss. And yeah, Kevin Wilson says it best. It says, a masterful example of storytelling told by one of the most open-hearted and clear-eyed writers I know. So that is When Ghosts Come Home, and you can get that one too. So I think that was a wide array, and somebody found a book that they were really interested in.
Thanks, Lainey. That was a great selection of titles, some sneak previews, a great tip about an audiobook. So thank you so much from HarperCollins. And now I'm going to turn it over to our library team. We'll start with Michelle Bulick to talk about books that just came out that are favorites, or books that are coming out, so you can get a head start on reserving them. Thanks. Michelle.
Thank you, Beth. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm Information Reader Services Librarian, and I'm super happy to be here. This is my 4th year doing the Fall Book Buzz, so I'm super excited. So the first title that I'm going to be talking about today is called LA Weather by Maria Amparo Escondo. It's already out, so you can put your name on the list at the library or pick it up. So it is Oscar and Keila Alvarado have been married for 39 years. They have 3 daughters, all successful in their careers, and they're happy, until an almost tragic event starts a series of events that question their happiness, starting with Keila's decision to divorce Oscar, much to the distress of their daughters, who asked her, please give it a year so maybe they can work it out. So she does agree, but she does have her doubts. Oscar has been paying more attention to the Weather Channel than her. She craves intimacy that he will not give. What she does not know is that Oscar harbors a secret that may cost them their futures. This novel, about a year in the life of an influential Jewish Mexican family, is full of secrets, deception, and betrayal. It's inspired by the telenovelas that the author knows and loves. This is a New York Times bestseller and a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and it should please those who enjoy dysfunctional family dramas. All right, and next, I'm going to be talking about The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. The Thursday Murder Club is back. Days after solving Cooper Chase Retirement Home's last murder, Elizabeth receives a letter from an old colleague who she used to be very close to. He had made a big mistake and needed her help. He took diamonds from a dangerous gangster who would not hesitate to kill him. She agrees, and all is well until the murders start and then multiply. She calls upon her friends, Joyce, Ron, and Ibrahim, to assist. Will they find the killer and the diamonds before the killer finds them? This is full of twists, turns, and red herrings. This charming mystery is just as good as the first, full of epic friendships, love, and a lot of heart. Even after the last page, the characters stay with you. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about a book that comes out in December. It is called The Cat Who Loved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. Rentaro Natsuki just lost his beloved grandfather and guardian, and he finds himself adrift. He spends his days in his grandfather's used bookstore that he inherited, waiting for his new guardian, an aunt he has never met. Rentaro is a hikikomori, which is someone who socially withdraws and isolates themselves, and he finds solace in the books that he loves. He thought that no one would miss him if he didn't show up to school, but maybe he is wrong about that. 2 of his classmates seemed determined to visit him at the shop. One day, The peace is broken when a talking tabby cat named Tiger enters the shop and asks him for his help. Together they journey to free books that have been imprisoned. A #1 bestseller in Japan, this enthralling tale of books, first love, fantasy, and an unusual friendship with a talking cat is a story for those whom books are so much more than words on paper. And thank you. That's it for me. So I'm going to pass it on to Lori.
Thanks, Michelle. My first book is Carry the Dog by Stephanie Ganji. Books described as coming-of-age novels are usually about young people coming into their own. In Carry the Dog, the main character, Bee Seeger, is coming into her own as she is about to turn 60. Bee has a looming lack of retirement savings. She has complicated relationships with her ex-husband and her extended family. She's also dealing with the lifelong fallout of being the subject, along with her brothers, of a famous photographer's controversial photos. And that famous photographer was her long deceased mother. Although this takes place in a world I definitely do not inhabit, the author has written a book full of people that I cared about. She's placed them in situations that are sad or funny or just plain weird. If you like books like The Interestings or Daisy Jones and the Six, you should check this one out. My next book is Chasing Me to My Grave by Wilfred Rembert. Wilfred? It's Winfred, I'm sorry. His first name is Winfred. Wilfred Rembert grew up in rural Georgia, working cotton fields at an early age. He was involved in the civil rights movement. He was almost lynched. He was jailed and he worked on a chain gang. While in prison, two good things happened. He met the love of his life, Patsy, while working in her town, and he learned leather tooling. In his 50s, with Patsy's support, he began creating remarkable artwork on leather, chronicling his life experiences. His life and artwork are intertwined in Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South. It's really a remarkable book. His story is compelling, and his artwork vividly depicts what life was like in the rural South during Jim Crow in the mid-20th century. If you like biographies, artists' lives, or American history, or just looking at interesting artwork, I recommend this book. And my final book is Miss Kopp Investigates by Amy Stewart. This is the 7th in the Kopp Sisters novel series by Amy Stewart. They're based on Constance Kopp, a pioneering woman police officer who lived in Hackensack, New Jersey in the early 1900s, and her sisters. They're real people. This book takes place after World War I. Their eldest brother, Francis, has died suddenly, leaving a widow and young children with many debts and no life insurance. The Kopp sisters returned to New Jersey from various post-wartime postings to figure out a way to support everyone. Most of the action in this book centers around Fleurette, the youngest Kopp sister, who's very theatrical and also a talented clothing designer and seamstress. What I like about these books is that the sisters are so sharply drawn and their relationships are so true to life, funny, exasperating, and sad. Stewart gives a really good feeling of what life was like in that time without hitting you over the head with her research. I do recommend reading the first novel in the series, Girl Waits with Gun, before this, but you could also read this one by itself because it does stand alone. I've also listened to some of them as audiobooks, and they're really delightful. So I hope you enjoy my recommendations. And now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Katie.
Thanks, Lori. So my first book that I wanted to talk about will be coming out in October. It's called Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. The cover might make you look a little bit like a philosophy book, but it's really not. It's a locked room mystery that takes place on a space station and it all has this kind of noir feel. There's a murder, of course. There's an android wolf. There are depressed private investigators, aliens who might not be aliens, space capitalists versus space anarchists. And everybody is Nigerian. Everybody is a space colonist from Nigeria in this. I thought this was a really fantastic exploration of how a mystery might play out on a space station. So really, I like this because it really is kind of effortless with these mystery details. It keeps on reminding you that things aren't quite right, in a way that's both a little bit sci-fi, but also like you can kind of use these as clues to who done it and where they might be. I really like it. It's it ends really well. I liked it, and I want to see much more from Tate Thompson. He's also the author of the famous Wormwood trilogy, Rosewater Insurrection, and Rosewater Redemption. So he's a really cool voice to look for. My next book, No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull, just came out in September. This book is, I want to describe it as like the X-Men, but written by Margaret Atwood in like a Handmaid's Tale kind of situation. It's literary, it's experimental, it's fresh. It's a lot of interconnected character studies, starting with Lena, whose brother is murdered by cops, but her brother is murdered while he's in werewolf form. So this video of her brother getting shot goes out on the internet and kind of starts this whole movement of like, oh, I guess monsters are real. Who's a monster? Where can I find these monsters? And so it kind of turns into this whole thing about minorities and how people kind of use excuses to like discriminate against folks because the people are like, oh, you're a monster, are the disenfranchised communities. I really like this book. It's 400 pages. It does not feel like 400 pages. It felt like it could be like 200 pages longer, and I still would have not gotten enough. It's great. It's also experimental. Like there's a narrator who, so things continue, and then somebody turns to the narrator and says, I'm looking at you. And we have no idea that there was somebody who was being looked at. So it's all kind of interesting. Who is this narrator? Who can see them? What's going on? I think this is a really interesting book, even if you're not interested in monsters or sci-fi or fantasy. It's just a really cool character study. Like each of those images that are on the cover, the fish, the knife, the snake, the cat, they all stand for each character's like little mini arc. So they all kind of wind through this whole narrative as the narrative goes on. And it's really interesting. It ends in this really powerful way. It's the first of a series, which usually I wouldn't recommend the first of a series when the series hasn't come out yet, but this is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And my third book that I wanted to talk about is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, this book, no joke, changed my life. This is a fantastic book. If you've read anything by Stephen King and enjoyed it, you will adore this book. It is horror, but it's kind of also like this manifesto of how slasher films reflect the American psyche. It follows this girl, Jade, who is in the middle of a really small town in Montana, I want to say, and things start happening that remind her of her favorite slasher films, and she's a huge fan of slasher films. The narrative is interconnected with her essays that she writes for her history class about slashers, but each one of these essays like kind of gets you like drags you in, and it makes you think like, oh, okay, I've never seen that, but I kind of get where you're coming from. If you like King is really good at describing fear, like as something that you feel. Stephen Graham Jones is really good at describing fear as how all these people are getting murdered. So it is bloody and it's gory, and it gets really dark, but the payoff is fantastic. So My Heart is a Chainsaw, I heartily recommend to anybody who's ever liked anything horror. I don't like horror all that much, and I don't like slashers. This made me love slashers. Like, this changed my whole opinion about a whole different type of movie. So I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book. All right, now that I'm done, I wanted to hand it over to Julia.
Hi there. Okay, so I'm Julia. This is my first time doing these book buzzes, so I'm really excited. The first book I want to talk about is The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. So this is a Gothic novel taking place in a fictionalized post-World War II Britain. And it features the titular Jane, who is a very practical, logical, self-taught accountant who enters a business-like marriage with Dr. Lawrence, who is a very skilled doctor who happens to be in need of a wife and an accountant. The arrangement seems ideal for both parties, but Dr. Lawrence only has one rule, which is Jane must not ever spend the night at Lindridge Hall, his family's ancient, dilapidated manor. Obviously, because this is a horror novel, circumstances do lead her to stay a night, and she's shocked to find that her very self-assured, confident doctor has become this terrified and paranoid man who's jumping at shadows. So, is he mad? Or is there something really haunting Lindridge Hall? So this book was inspired by Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak. So if you're familiar with that movie and enjoyed it, I highly recommend this book. I happen to love Gothic horror and I love romance, so seeing the two combined made me very happy. And the book does that spooky thing I love where it slips into uncertainty and makes you wonder what's real and what isn't. And you'll find yourself questioning everyone's motives and everyone's sanity as Jane tries to basically unravel the mystery of what's happening at Lindridge Hall. It's spooky, it's suspenseful. There's an incredible third act twist that made me gasp out loud while I was reading it, and I scared my roommate. So if you like Gothic horror novels with really intricate plots and ghosts that may or may not exist, definitely recommend this book. And it's coming out in October, so it's seasonally appropriate too. The next book I want to talk about is The Cabinet by Unsu Kim. So The Cabinet is about a bored, sort of average salary man who is roped into keeping watch over Cabinet 13 at his job, which is this mysterious cabinet filled with notes about human beings who find themselves discovering unusual abilities and undergoing strange experiences. So the book explores various files from the cabinet, delving into these very quirky and yet poignant, I think, stories about these unusual individuals and their sort of bizarre experiences. Like a woman whose tongue spontaneously transforms into a lizard, or someone whose doppelganger keeps trying to break up with her boyfriend, or an older man who finds himself slowly transforming into a ginkgo tree, and so on and so forth. So this book is science fiction, but more of literary science fiction, kind of along the lines of like Kazuo Ishiguro. The prose kind of reminds me a little bit of Haruki Murakami in that like fantastical, surreal things are described in a very straightforward manner by a very direct narrator. So it delves into some serious issues like the isolation felt by being an office worker in a big city and things like that. But it still remains very playful, I think. And each story is really entertaining and thought-provoking. So I found this to be a pretty quick read. So I highly recommend it if you enjoy literary science fiction or short story collections. And it also happened to win the Munakdone Award, which is South Korea's most prestigious literary award. So if you are interested in learning more about South Korean literature, I think this is a really good place to start. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Kopp, going back to the whole horror thing, because I love my horror. So this one is a novella, again, a really quick read. It's about a group of friends celebrating a wedding, and they decide to stay overnight at this allegedly haunted mansion, where, according to legend, hundreds of years ago, a young bride was buried alive underneath the foundation of this mansion. So a night of drinking and fun slowly begins to unravel into this nightmare scenario as interpersonal tensions start to rise and a mysterious figure watches them from the shadows. And it all culminates into this explosive event where the soon-to-be bride vanishes, and it's up to the rest of the group to find her. So this book is like the A24 movie of novellas, in my opinion, which might be something that some people adore and other people's might not adore as much. So it's the writing style is just very lyrical, almost like poetic, and it features extremely flawed individuals crumpling basically under the weight of their own choices and their neuroses and their personal baggage and the resentments they feel that they just can't let go of, and how all of these come to clash in the course of a few hours. So if you really like flawed protagonists in conflict, or stories where the tensions and stakes just keep rising and rising and rising until you reach this moment of catharsis, I really think you'll enjoy this book. It's definitely what I would call a literary ghost story, but it's also, it's got a lot of elements of psychological horror too. Oh, and if you enjoyed Mexican Gothic by Moreno Garcia, I really think you'll like this one too. It's short, but it definitely scared me. Okay, with that, I am going to turn things over to Beth now for a Q&A. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all to everyone. There's so many great books that you all buzzed about, whether it's books that are out now that we can put our hands on or ones that we should put on hold, which I know I've done already, a few titles. So thank you guys for that great selection. I'm going to invite everyone to come back on and join us. And I wanted to point out that if you want more news of new books, you can sign up for our e-newsletter. We have one that comes out every week in the fall with titles that are being published every Tuesday. And then we do book recommendations once a month and occasional book news throughout the year. So we've got the link in the chat box and you can sign up right now. You can also enter any questions that you have in the chat box. And I thought I would just start us off by doing a quick lightning round and just asking everybody to tell us what book you are reading right now. I'm going to just go in order of my screen. So I'm going to start with Julia, and we'll just say what book you're reading right now.
I am reading The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. It's another horror book about some documentarians who are going to this abandoned village where some bad things happened a while back, and then some spooky things begin to happen to the documentary crew. I love that stuff.
Thanks, Julia. Okay, Lainey?
I'm reading Fake by Erica Katz. It comes out in February, so a little bit away, but it has to do with like forging art. I didn't know that was a thing, but museums have people to forge the art so they can clean them, and they put the other one up. And a woman who gets kind of pushed into this art world and Instagram influencers. It's super fun.
Sounds like a fun title. How about Annie?
Well, I just finished reading What Comes After this morning. I thought that was another debut novel that I thought was pretty impressive. I did just reserve at the library When Ghosts Come Home because I love Wiley Cash. But yeah, definitely have some recommendations on this list that we heard about tonight. So I will be checking those out.
Okay, Brian, you're next on my screen.
Okay, I'm reading a book that's not coming out until next summer, and it's by Otessa Moshfegh. She did Death in Your Hands, and what was the other one? A couple of them, and of course I'm blanking now, but something like Rest and Relaxation something. Anybody remember that one?
Mhm.
Anyway, this one's called something like Lopnova, and I'm reading it on a manuscript on a device, so it doesn't have the title, you know what I mean, on every page. So yes, it was called My Year of Rest and Relaxation. So this one's called Lopnova or something, which is a little mythical town in Europe about 100 years ago. And the rest of the details Otessa doesn't get into, but it's quintessential Otessa. It's very odd, very weird. And as the British would say, it's mental.
Thanks, Brian. Michelle.
I'm reading the Daughters of Yalta by Catherine Grace Katz, which is about the daughters of Winston Churchill, Franklin Roosevelt, and the Harrison guy that I don't remember his name. Yes, I'm really liking it. And it is the book that we're discussing for Judy Levin, which is October 5th at 1. So if you haven't, please join us on October 5th at 1 in the library, in the meeting room, to discuss the Daughters of Yalta.
Thanks, Michelle. And the author is also appearing in October. You can find the date and register on our calendar. It's also mid-October after the book discussion. So that sounds really interesting. Okay, Lori.
I am reading The Madness of Crowds by Louise Penny. I have taken a break, had taken a break from Three Pines, a little too many people dying there for a small town, if you ask me, but I ended up with this one and I'm really enjoying it. So that's what I'm reading right now. I'm almost done. So after work, I am going to go home and finish it.
That sounds like a plan. And Katie?
I am in the middle of Meet Me in Another Life. And I can't remember the author's name for the life of me, but it just came out. It's really interesting. It's about two people who keep on reliving the same life, but depending on when they die in their past life, they come back at that same time. So like sometimes they're parent and child, adopted parent and child, sometimes they're boyfriend, girlfriend, sometimes they're brother and sister, sometimes they're like drifter and psychologist, but they slowly remember each of these lifetimes that they've lived together, and they're trying to piece out, why are they reliving this? What is the point of this? How do they get out of it? It's kind of like Groundhog Day with two people, but more serious than Palm Springs. So I'm really enjoying it.
That sounds good. Okay, and I'm not sure we have any questions coming in yet, but
I have a question. Beth,
yes.
What are you reading?
Oh my gosh, I am reading the new Sally Rooney book, Beautiful World, Where Are You? And yeah, I just thought I would read it just because it came out now, and I can't wait to read the book review as soon as I'm done with it. I've been saving that. Thanks, Lori.
Mhm.
I'm going to throw this to the publishers. Do you all have time to read books for pleasure? I mean, I know all reading is probably for pleasure for you guys, but do you have time to read books that aren't like on your list for work, or how does that work for you guys?
I mean, they're all books of pleasure for me, but to like outside of work, for the meaning of pleasure is, yeah, definitely. I read a lot of true crime outside of work. I mean, for work, but outside of work, I just read American Predator. That one was good. Good sounds like a bad word to use, but it was, yeah. And I don't know. I definitely try to. I think that my weight of what I read is definitely skewed. Like I don't get to do it all the time, but I try to make time, and I have a book club, so I try to like not read HarperCollins books there.
That sounds like a good way to get other books mixed in. Yes. Annie or Brian?
I definitely
Um,
try to read other books too. There's just too much good stuff to. Also, it's nice to be able to read a book that somebody else is reading at that time, because we work so far out. So, the books I'm reading for work don't come out for another 6-8 months. So it's nice to read things that then you can have a conversation with someone with actually in real time.
Yeah, I try to read at least 2 non-Penguin Random House books a year is kind of my goal. And I think this year I'm up to 3, maybe 4. I've been able to squeeze in, but as everyone else, we have so many books and luckily so many good ones that it keeps me quite busy. And I'm a reader anyway, so but I do try to get in at least a couple a year that aren't Penguin Random House books.
That sounds great. Oh, and I think, Brian, you said lots of great reviews on the Sally Rooney book. Does that happen to be a Penguin Random House book?
It's not a Penguin. I don't know if it's a Random House book. I should know, but I've just run into a lot of great reviews, and it seems like it's one of those books that a lot of people are buzzing about right now. And I
Mhm.
see the cover all over.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very hot book to have. Yeah.
Yes.
So good choice.
Okay. Well, I think you guys, this was great fun, and thank you all for the variety of titles that you buzzed about. And I'm sure we gave all of our attendees plenty of book recommendations to add to their pile, TBR pile, to be read pile. So thank you all for participating, and thanks to our attendees for joining us. And we'll see you again next fall. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.